everyone, it's I, Whack Anime What If here to present you with What If Deku Had a Yandere Quirk, Part 2. Let's get into this. Currently, Izuku Midoriya is having a nightmare. It's quite a recurring nightmare, but nonetheless, it's quite annoying to him. He wakes up and immediately looks to the side of him and sees no one. He sighs in relief, and then he immediately looks beside him and realizes, oh, when he looks out the window, it's nighttime. I guess I didn't sleep that long. So he decides to place his phone on the charger, but he realizes he drops his phone. Right when he did, he's like, now I gotta reach for my phone, that's gonna suck. Before, all of a sudden, a hand appears out from under the bed, picks up the phone, and hands it to him. He immediately picks the phone up and says, oh, thank you. He puts it on the charger on his nightstand beside him, lays down, and closes his eyes, and then immediately he shoots his eyes open, and he's like, wait, what the fuck? I'm living alone right now. Who's under my bed? And just looks under the bed and sees the creepiest face ever. Sees Kurumi right there with a smile that just says, you know what's gonna happen. And Izuku's just like, nope. He just gets off the bed and starts running all the way out of his room, screaming like a little girl. While Kurumi is under the bed just giggling and disappears through the shadows. Midoriya runs across his room, knocks on his mom's door, and says, Mom, the crazy lady's back. And then he realizes, oh wait, my mom's still at work. So he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to deal with it. So he just walks down the stairs. He's about to make himself a little snack. And then he sees, oh wow, there's already pancakes there. So he just decides to go ahead and eat the pancakes. He's like, oh, these are actually pretty good. And then he hears a voice behind him say, I'm glad you like them. And then he's like, oh, thanks. They're pretty good. How did you make them, though? And then he thinks, wait a minute. My mom isn't here. These are not pancakes made by her. Who made these? Looks behind him, sees nothing. Then he's like, oh, looks like I'm safe. Looks back in front of him, towards the table, is about to eat the pancakes with his fork he put beside his plate, and then he realizes, my fork's gone. But looks up and sees a hand in front of him with a fork and some pancakes on the fork. And a voice just says, say, ah, and immediately Izuku says, ah, he just starts screaming, but literally gets his mouth stuffed with pancakes. And a voice just says, oh, that's adorable, you're scared. And before Izuku could even look up to see the most horrifying face ever that just screams, yep, you're fucked. He looks behind him when he hears the door open, and he immediately sees his mom walk through. And then Izuku just runs towards her and says, Mom, this scary lady's back. And immediately Inko says, Son, we've been over this. There's no scary lady in the house. Immediately Izuku just says, oh, okay. How do you explain those pancakes over there then? And immediately Inko says, you're in your last days of middle school. You're 14 now. Stop being scared of this crazy lady, apparently, that you have hallucinations about. And immediately Izuku says, you know what, can we just trade rooms then? And he whispers this into her ear, and she says, you know what, fine. We'll trade rooms, it's not going to change anything. And then immediately Izuku sneaks into her room, just leaps in her bed, while Inko just walks up to Izuku's room, lays down in his bed, and says, honestly, this kid needs to get over his fears. I mean, he made pancakes and blamed it on this crazy lady, she says in mocking tone. And then she looks beside her to see Izuku's phone on a charger, and then plugs her phone up right beside it, and is about to put her phone in the charger and place it on the nightstand, but drops it. Then says, alright, I'm just gonna have to pick it up. Is about to reach downwards, but sees a hand grab the phone and lift it up towards her, and say, here you go. Is a feminine voice saying that, and immediately Inko says, "Oh, thank you." Grabs the phone, plugs it in, lays down, closes her eyes, is about to go to sleep, halfway asleep, then opens her eyes and says, "Oh wait, Izuku just in my room, and he wouldn't be hiding under a bed, so who the fuck is that?" Like, just jumps up, looks under the bed, and just sees the most horrifying rape face you can ever muster, which is Kurumi, and immediately starts screaming and running towards Izuku's room, saying, "There's a crate!" Running towards her room and telling Izuku, "There's a crazy lady under your bed." And Izuku says, "No, there's no such thing as a crazy lady under my bed," says sarcastically. And Inko says, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you, but would you have believed yourself?" And he said, "Yes, I would have." Well, Inko says, "You know what? We'll just sleep in this bed tonight." So she just sleeps beside him after calling the police, which they did check, and they didn't see a single thing. And immediately they slept inside of Inko's room. The next morning, Izuku wakes up, gets out of bed, sees his mom still asleep beside him, and he decides, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go get dressed, go to school, enjoy my last moments of hell, which is middle school, and then go to UA, the dream school that I've always wanted, is what he says. Immediately, when he gets up, walks to the bathroom, he opens the door, and then all he sees is Kurumi in lingerie, looking dead at him with the creepiest smile still on her face. And Izuku just closes the door and says, "Alright, I'm going to try this again." Opens the door again and sees Kurumi still there staring directly at the door. Right afterwards, just closes the door one more time, triple checks, and sees nothing. He's like, "Oh, these hallucinations are getting out of control." So he just gets dressed, gets everything done, and immediately he splashes some water on his face before leaving. He looks in the mirror, and then he sees someone behind him, and he's like, I'm gonna check behind me real quick. Looks behind him, still sees her, then quickly walks calmly and collectively. Who am I kidding? He starts sprinting towards the door, opening it, closing it, running down the stairs and screaming, "Help! The crazy lady's back!" And immediately Inko woke up and just heard, "A crazy lady's back." And Inko is thinking, maybe yesterday was a dream. He's got to stop with these hallucinations. Immediately gets up out of bed, goes on the stairs, and makes Izuku some breakfast, pancakes, hash browns, and maple syrup with a side of, well, eggs. Immediately, Izuku basically just inhales the entire breakfast like if he was Kirby, and just says, "Alright, Mom, I'm gonna go ahead and go now." And she says, "Alright, be careful. There's been villain attacks, and I don't want you getting hurt or anything." And Izuku says, "Oh, that won't happen." Just walks out of the room, goes towards the front door, opens the door, walks outside, and goes towards his middle school. On the way to his middle school, he ends up encountering Bakugo, who sees him, and immediately the Pokemon theme starts playing. Dun, 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 dun. And Izuku has 3 options in front of his screen to either attack, run, or 3, scream like a little bitch and run. He chooses option 3. He starts screaming like a little bitch and starts running to his school as quickly as possible, with Bakugo right on his tail, using explosions to propel himself towards him. And immediately, as Izuku's running, he gets this sensation of dread behind him, and it isn't from Bakugo. He looks behind him just to see Kurumi chasing after Bakugo, and Bakugo looking behind him while sweating buckets, and just blasting off quicker towards Izuku, while Izuku's running from Bakugo. Bakugo's running from Kurumi. And this circle, this entire triangle right here, just happens on the way to school, Once Izuku runs into the school building, he just opens the door as quickly as possible, runs up the stairs, goes to his classroom, opens the door, closes it behind him very, very quickly, ignoring the fact that Bakugo was right behind him and was just about to walk in after stopping his explosion projection he was doing, just firing himself like a missile. And right when he was about to walk in, the door literally just slammed into his face, and he just runs into it, and he's like, "Oh, fuck. Why, Deku?" And he says, "I'm gonna kill that kid." And immediately behind him just senses an ominous presence, and just says, never mind. I'm gonna make friends with that kid," is what he says when he looks behind him and sees Kurumi. And she just head pats him and says, "Good little bitch," and disappears into the shadows, very creepily, too. Like, very creepily disappears into shadows. And Bakugo just says, "Alright, note to self, only beat Midori up when she's not watching." Unknown to him, she's always watching. So once he walks into the classroom, opens the door, just sits down into his seat, still sweating some bullets of sweat, and Izuku's just having his head down into his notes, writing more about quirks and stuff, and then writing about his daily life of being stalked by this one random crazy woman, which no one believes that is stalking him, but hey, what do you say? He's tried calling the police numerous times, and they just think, oh, it's his imagination, he's hyperactive. Hell, even his doctor said he was, although his doctor did seem kind of nervous, and was checking behind him. Flashback, Izuku was talking about this crazy lady so many times that Inko thought he was mentally ill. So Inko decided to bring Izuku, who was currently at the age of about 8, towards the doctor, a psychiatrist to be exact. Right when they entered the building and walked into the room that they were scheduled to go into, immediately Inko left Izuku with the doctor, and right when that happened, he sat down on the couch in front of the doctor, and the doctor said, "Alright, so," while not looking upwards, said, "Alright, so what's the problem?" And Izuku says, "Well, there's this crazy chick that just keeps on following me, appears in my house, disappears randomly. My mom thinks it's a hallucination, but I honestly don't think it is." And immediately the psychiatrist that's in front of him says, yeah, it definitely sounds like hallucination. Alright, we're just gonna check this box here." And immediately goes on to the second question, and it says, "Alright, so the second question says, have you been taking any drugs?" And then Izuku just looks at the psychiatrist with the face that says, "Really? I'm only a kid." And he says that out loud, and he just looks at Izuku dead in the eyes and says, "I took drugs when I was a kid, and I'm perfectly fine." And then Izuku looks behind him and sees his medical plaque, like his psychiatry actual decree, and then he says, "Isn't that just that's a coupon for KFC?" And then immediately the psychiatrist looks behind him and says, "Oh, I framed the wrong thing. Could you just ignore that?" And Izuku says, "I don't think I will." And then the psychiatrist says, "Yes, you will, kid. Yes, you will." He says, "Alright, the next question. Do you like Kurumi?" Wait, I didn't put this on the actual sheet, so how did this question get in here? And immediately Izuku says, "Who's Kurumi? Wait, isn't that the other kid that I saved from Kachan?" And he immediately starts having flashbacks to that day with the most unsettling smile just appearing in his mind. And he's like, let's just say no. And before he can even say anything, he feels a sense of dread and he says, "Let's just say yes." And immediately he says, "Alright, just gonna check this box. I don't know why that question was in here." And he immediately looks downwards and says, "For the psychiatrist, a question. Do you want to live? Do not classify him as crazy." There's a checkbox saying, "I want to live." Checkbox saying, "I want to die." A third one saying, "I do not care." The doctor immediately says, "Oh, wow, this is for me, I guess. I'm just going to say I do not care." Before he can even do anything, he looks upwards at Izuku and says, "I don't know how these questions got in here." And then sees right behind him this little girl with the most sinister face that just says, "You're fucked." And immediately Izuku says, "Sir, why is your face changed? And he has like the most horrified expression, and he's like, yeah, kid, you know what? You're perfectly fine. I don't even need the sheet. He just throws his actual clipboard with the papers right behind him and says, "You're perfectly sane. This is perfectly normal for a kid your age. Just your hormones acting up, and you can go ahead and get out of my office. Please never come back, and take that with you." And immediately, Izuku had so many questions, but he's just getting shoved out of the office. And he's like, "Oh my god, I thought I was about to die." And he had his hand like towards his chest while he closed the door behind Izuku. And then he hears a voice behind him saying, "That's not gonna save you." And then he just has a face that says, "Oh, fuck." A few weeks later, the doctor went missing. Flashback ended. Izuku was still in the middle of class, jotting into his notes about like his daily life and just overall the quirks that he's analyzed. While the teacher walks in, has a stack of papers, and says, "Hello everyone, these are your aptitude tests, but who am I kidding? You all want to become heroes." He just yeets them in the air, and then all of them just like, all of those papers just fly everywhere, and just start smacking people in the face. The papers just smack them in the face real quick before disappearing throughout the window. And then the teacher says, "Oh, I'm supposed to still turn those in, so I'm gonna need you guys to redo that later on." And everyone just looked at him and just said, "Really?" At the same time. Izuku even like lifted his head up from the notes he was taking and said, "Really?" as well. While the teacher just had some sweat going down his face and said, "Alright, so apparently with these sheets that are right beside me, these copies I made, I'm really glad I made copies." He like just lifts them up and says, "Alright, so it says, apparently Bakugo wants to apply to UA. Everyone's saying, oh, but UA has such a low acceptance rate. You'll never get in." And then Bakugo just kicks his foot up on the desk and stands on it and says, "Of course I'll get in. I have the best quirk in this entire school. It's the flashiest, the coolest, and the most heroic. Not to mention the fact that I am this overall heroic in character." While Izuku just has flashbacks of the time where he was stuffed into a locker, or the time where he was basically yeeted into the girls' locker room at one point by accident, yeeted into it by Bakugo. And then Bakugo just walks away while he's just getting beaten down by the females. And immediately having another flashback to the time where Bakugo set him up with a date with this one girl, and apparently a few weeks later disappeared. Doesn't know why. But he realized later on that the girl was a trap, so he kind of dodged the bullet there. Too bad that the trap didn't dodge one, but hey, back to the story. So, while Izuku's still having those flashbacks, Bakugo is spouting all this good shit. And then the teacher says, "Oh wait, Izuku, you also want to apply." And right when that happened, right when those words left his mouth, Izuku just said, "Oh fuck, here we go again." Bakugo looks behind him, walks towards Izuku's desk, slams his hands on the desk and explodes it right in front of Izuku. And he ends up burning up his notebook a little bit, but Izuku immediately pans out the flames, so it's still okay, and he picks it up off the desk very quickly. And then Bakugo says, "You nerd, you'll never become a hero. You don't have what it takes. You don't have the personality, you don't have the wits, you don't have the intelligence, you don't have the quirk, you don't have the power, you don't have anything. All you are is a useless Deku, and that's all you'll ever be. Honestly, I'm surprised even your parents aren't disappointed in you." And right when he said that, Izuku, he's many things. He's a very patient person. He cares a lot about people. He doesn't usually care, well, he cares about what they think. He doesn't really show it on the outside sometimes. Just puts up a fake smile. But at this moment, he decided, you know what? Fuck that. He punches Bakugo dead in the face. And everyone just looked at him like he just did the most savage thing in the world. Or they looking at him like he just signed his own death wish. He punched Bakugo so hard in the face, he flung a little bit back and landed into a desk. He got up, ran towards Midoriya and says, "You're going to pay for that, nerd. punched him into the chest so hard with his fist that he flew backwards into the back of the class. And then Zuko was like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have done that in his head. And Bakugo just has a smile that says, I'm about to end your whole career. And he just starts pummeling him in the rib cage with explosive punches and causing burn marks to be on his chest. And immediately, Izuku just says, you're not a hero, you're just a villain. He mutters this out while losing consciousness a little bit, before Bakugo is finally pulled off by the teacher. And the teacher just says, good, you did good, Bakugo, but you kind of did a little bit overboard. We'll take Izuku to the infirmary after this. He'll be fine. After all, we don't want any more complaints by his mother. And immediately, Bakugo sits back down towards his desk, and he has a foreboding feeling like he just fucked up. But he's smiling still, because he thought he did something very good today. Little did he know, he probably just signed his death warrant. But hey, while Izuku is still in the back of the class, still on the ground, barely standing back up after the bell rings, he walks towards his notebook on his desk, picks it up, is about to leave before it gets yanked out of his hands by Bakugo. Bakugo immediately sets the notebook on fire by exploding it and yeets it out the window. He immediately says, hey, you want to see your notebook? Does your notebook want to go to the moon? And immediately Izuku says, no. And Bakugo explodes it and just says, why wait? And he yeets it out the window, while Izuku is just like, that was my notebook. My only quirk notebook. And he immediately starts to cry a little bit. Bakugo still gets a shiver down his spine, and he's like, oh, okay. No, I'm not scared of the crazy bitch that follows Izuku. Not scared. Totally not scared. And immediately just says, okay. Just gonna continue with this? He says this in his head, but on the outside, he's already still speaking. He says, hey, Izuku, I know how you can get a better, actual quirk, a better quirk. One that doesn't make it look like you're so quirkless and useless. And immediately Izuku has a little smile and says, what is it, Kachan? Immediately he says, why don't you go on top of the school roof, look down the roof towards the ground and jump off it. And hope you get a quirk in your next life. A better quirk. Or that you can become an actual hero. And right when he said this, Bakugo feels a horrible sensation go through him. He feels like he just literally got shot so many times that it isn't even funny. And he feels as if he's in so much danger right now. So he just immediately just runs out of the classroom. No explanation. The goons are following him because they still feel shivers too. And Izuku is just dejected right now. He just goes on autopilot. He just walks all the way down the stairs, goes all the way outside, walks towards his burnt notebook, picks it up, puts it into his bag, walks all the way towards his home in autopilot, but taking the wrong route. Immediately taking a different route than usual, the long route, which would bite him in the ass right now. As soon as he's walking down, he's starting to think, no, I can become a hero. All you gotta do is work hard. I can become one just like All Might. Just remember his smile he has. Remember what he says, never give up, go beyond, go plus ultra, he says out loud. And then he just pumps his hand up into the air and just starts to just waddle walk all the way towards his home, having a smile on his face and just laughing like a fake laugh like All Might. Not hearing a whisper saying, that's hot. Or that's really cute, actually. That's adorable, is what Kurumi says. And immediately Izuku just hears this and says, okay, just gonna say that was a voice inside my head. And just ignores it. While Kurumi's like literally right behind him. Just in like halfway inside of a shadow, just creepily looking at him. With her clock eye. And immediately Izuku just ignoring it, just walking. And he hears something behind him. So he looks behind him, expecting to see the creepy girl, but no. Sees a manhole just shoot upwards, hitting the actual top of the bridge that he's under, and immediately seeing a giant booger pop out of the manhole. And right when he sees that, he sees the sludge, and he's just saying, so, how's it going? And immediately the sludge just looks at him, has eyes and a mouth, and says, good, how about you? He just says in a distorted voice. And Izuku says, I'm doing good. Could you let me continue having a good day and just let me, like, slide past so I can go to my house? And the sludge villain's like, let me think about that. How about no? And Izuku says, oh, I thought you would say that. Well, you leave me no choice. I'm going to use my special technique that I've learned throughout generations. Thousands of years in my family. And he says in the most manly voice he can muster. And he says, it's called the technique of running away. He just starts running all the way away from the sludge villain. But he just gets caught because the sludge already had, like, its tentacle arm out of the sludge wrapping around Izuku's leg. And immediately Izuku in his mind is like, I watched enough hentai to know where this is going. And he gets dragged into the sludge, and the sludge is trying to force its way into Izuku's body through his mouth. And immediately, Izuku's thoughts were, I guess I can't become a hero. I guess Kachan was right. He thinks weakly, before his eyes start to close a little bit, and he ends up seeing a shadow appear before his eyes start to close into darkness. POV change. Kurumi, who was following Izuku, and witnessed this happen, and was halfway into a shadow behind Izuku, just barely out of sight, pops out of the shadow, walks behind the sludge villain very stealthily, and puts her flintlock right behind the sludge villain's head, and immediately says, yoo-hoo, with a click of the gun. And immediately the sludge villain looks behind him and says, what do you want? And sees a musket right behind his head, facing right into the middle of his head now, his slimy head. And immediately says, can we talk about this, little girl? I have candy. We could just talk about this. And immediately Kurumi says, yeah, not today, pedophile. And just shoots the sludge villain's head off and starts blowing the sludge villain into smithereens, missing Izuku just barely by a hair. The sludge goes off of Izuku. Kurumi just picks up Izuku bridal style and is about to walk away until all of a sudden she hears, I am here, and immediately looks behind her to see All Might standing right there and says, I'll save you, girl and boy. Oh, wait, where's the villain? He looks behind him and sees sludge everywhere. Like, the sludge is, like, slowly reforming. And Kurumi just says, why don't you get a bottle or something to get up the sludge villain before it attacks someone else? I'll just be taking Darling here to his house really quickly. And immediately, All Might in his head just has some alarms going off. And he says, do you know this kid right here? And before any more questions could happen, Kurumi just gives him a face saying, don't ask any questions, just go. And All Might just says, I'm sorry, but I've got to, get you to the police station. You look kind of suspicious. That smile on your face is very unsettling, and I don't think that kid knows you. He's shivering in his sleep while you're holding him. And why are you holding him bridal style? And how did you, deal with this villain? And why are there... Wait, now that I think about it, I see 2 guns on you. You're not supposed to have guns. Well, unless it's your quirk, but you're not supposed to have your quirk active. You're going to have to follow me to the police station, young lady. Immediately grabbing Kurumi by the arm and trying to take off with her, but she just disappears into a shadow with Izuku. And All Might, who's watching this, is seeing the most unsettling smile and just sees her sink into a shadow in the floor. And All Might just says, I'm going to have some nightmares after this. He looks to the ground and sees that the sludge villain is now gone. And he thinks, oh shit, I didn't do my job properly. Well, no one's gonna find out. He just walks away, pretends like nothing happened. Just kidding. He tries to find the villain afterwards. To no avail. POV change. Bakugo is walking down an alleyway, thinking, I should probably leave Izuku alone before that crazy bitch actually does kill me. I mean, I remember the time where she threatened to castrate me. I mean, she's not gonna actually do it. Well, she tried that one time. I'm just really glad that my mom stopped her. Honestly. When he thinks back to that one time, he starts to shiver. He just walks down the alleyway, kicking some cans with his goons, saying they should go to an arcade or something. Bakugo promptly agrees because he's kind of bored. And then he sees a slime creature booger thing appear right behind him when he's looking around to his goon on the side. And he says, hey, did you guys invite any friends? Bakugo says. And then both the goons look at him and say, no, why? He looks behind. He says, look behind you. They both look behind them and see this giant booger. And they say, oh, yeah, that's not our friend. What's your name, sir? Is what one of them say. And the slime villain says, I am someone that should be feared, respected, someone that should be worshipped, is what the slime says in like a monologue speech, and says, my name is so feared that villains cower in their sleep. And then the two goons beside Bakugo are like, currently just looking at him, cowering, and Bakugo is just like waving his hand and saying, could you hurry up with your monologue real quick? I mean, honestly, I could just like run away. I'm being very polite by letting you finish your monologue right now. I hope you know this. And the slime says, oh yeah, you actually are. Okay, let me just go ahead and tell you. But the name that they all fear is Steven, he says in a menacing voice. And then Bakugo just bursts out laughing. He says, oh my god, I thought you were about to say, like, the Crusher, the Annihilator, or something like that. But no. You say your name is Steven. He starts burst out laughing. The two goons beside him start to laugh too. He says, oh my god, everyone fear the villain known as Steven. He'll give you car insurance. Oh my god. What is he gonna do? And then the slime villain just looks at them like, yeah, you done goofed. He just slaps two of the goons into a wall, breaking both walls when he slapped them both in two separate walls, and walks towards Bakugo, who Bakugo tries to fire his explosion quirk at the head. The slime just moves his head out of the way, and immediately dodges it, grabs Bakugo with tentacles, and pulls him inside of him, which sounds so wrong, and then tries to stuff himself into him as a meat suit, but Bakugo just lets off explosions, causing the buildings to explode around him, causing so much damage that he doesn't really care because he's trying to survive, though. And POV change. Izuku. He's currently unconscious and he sees just darkness. And then he ends up opening his eyes slightly. He looks upwards and sees the crazy lady. Izuku just puts both of his hands in front of his eyes. He rubs them and says, yeah, it's just a hallucination. Looks upwards and says, hello there. And Kurumi just looks at him while using one hand to pet his hair, the other hand to wave at him and say, hello there, Izu-kun. And immediately Izuku says, so do I know you? Wait, you're the crazy lady that always follows me and stuff. Why are you doing this? And she says, oh, you know why. Because you're mine, is what she says, and a creepy smile forms. And Izuku says, so, I'm just gonna say this. What happened? I thought I was, gonna be killed by a villain. She says, oh, I saved you. Of course. And then Izuku hears explosions off in the distance. And then he says, I'm gonna go check out what that is. And she's like, no, you're not. And just grabs him. Immediately just grabs him into a hold. Just hugs him. And is right on his back now, after Izuku got up out of the lap pillow that he had. Just jumps on his back. And immediately Izuku just says, you know what? I'm still gonna go there. Starts running there, even though has Kurumi on his back. And Kurumi's just like letting the wind go through her hair and screaming, "Wee!" While Izuku says, "I'm not a horse, get off me." And immediately Kurumi says, "Well, you are my ride, but I could try a different ride," and does a sly smirk, while Izuku does blush a little bit. And immediately in his head says, "Okay, that was kind of clever, but this bitch is crazy." Runs towards the cause of explosions and sees all around duct tape that says "keep out," and sees some heroes attempting to help Bakugo. Who am I kidding? He looks at them and sees that they ain't doing shit. He sees one of them on their phone. He sees another one just recording it. He sees someone screaming out "World Star!" And then he sees this one fat ass motherfucker eating a Big Mac. And then he looks towards the sludge villain and sees someone exploding out of the sludge villain. And then he hears the sludge villain says, "Let me inside you." And Bakugo says, "Nope, nope, 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 nope. Word that differently, please." He starts screaming, and Izuku says, "Oh my god, it's Kachan." He pushes Kurumi off of his back. She looks unpleased by this and gives him the face like, "Really?" While Izuku just looks a little scared about that, but then rushes in towards Kachan, runs towards the sludge villain, and just yeets his backpack that was on his back as well towards the villain and throws it directly at his eyes. And it hits his eyes, and immediately the sludge villain says, "Oi, that isn't very nice. That was quite rude." And Izuku says, "Well, it's quite rude to kidnap people." And then the sludge villain, while Izuku's like clawing his way into the sludge villain's sludge, trying to dig out Kachan, he grabs his hand and tries to pull him out. He pulls him halfway out, and then the villain says, "Well, I'm not apologizing," and slaps Midoriya directly into the face, a few meters away from the sludge villain. And Kachan is being pulled along with Midoriya. And right when they're pulled out, Kurumi, who saw this, just gave the face that literally, when the sludge villain saw the face of Kurumi for an instant, just the sludge villain just pissed himself, screamed like a little girl, and says, "All Might, save me!" And All Might in the distance, like, who just arrived, said, "I saw what that kid did. Quite heroic. You know, I might make him my successor," in his head. And then he starts running towards the villain, buffing up back into his all might state, not his small might state, and runs towards him and punches him so hard the weather changes and he splashes into pieces. And then he gets a little bottle and bottles him up and says, "I did it! Plus Ultra!" And everyone starts screaming it. Izuku's being chewed out by all the heroes and getting chewed out by Kurumi too. And Bakugo's being praised for his quirk and for him exploding buildings apparently. While Izuku tries to point this out and says, "You guys are kind of, pointing out, he's doing great by exploding buildings. Are you guys encouraging terrorists?" And when he said this, all the newscasts start pointing the microphones towards the heroes, and they're like, no, we're not." And immediately, someone in the background says, "We're definitely recruiting him." And then Izuku swore he saw someone that looked like he had a hand fetish because he had a hand on his face. Izuku thought maybe that's just a prop, and they just disappeared into the shadows. And Izuku just walks off while the heroes are having to deal with some deep shit, and Kanchan's trying to catch up to Izuku to thank him, before being pulled into an alleyway by Kurumi and getting quite the horrifying experience. And you could hear a few screams, and you could hear, "No, no, no, get away from me. Please, no. God, no." And then all you can hear is, "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way," is what Kurumi says. Before you could hear Bakugo screaming, "No, I don't want to do it anyway." And Kurumi saying, "We're going to do this the hard way." You could hear Bakugo screams. And Izuku is walking towards his house, really bummed out because, well, he couldn't really do that much. And because he had to get saved, and Bakugo ended up saying he couldn't be a hero, and so did all those other heroes when they were disrespecting him and chewing him out. When he's walking towards his house, he ends up seeing a figure appearing in front of him, just sliding across in front of him, and he says, "I am here, and I would like you to inherit my quirk." He points towards him, and then Izuku just looks at him and says, "What do you mean by that, All Might?" And All Might says, "Well, let me explain," before going to Small Might form, coughing up some blood, and going on the ground, like, "I'm dying." And Izuku says, "Oh my god, I gotta call hospital. Are you okay, All Might? Wait, are you All Might? Are you a villain? Are you trying to kill me?" And he puts up a fighting stance, and then all of a sudden, All Might puts up like a serious face and says, "If I was trying to kill you, you'd already be dead." And then immediately, Izuku says, "Omari wa no shindayu," while immediately All Might says, "Nani?" I think you just hear some ear rape going on before it changes back, and Izuku says, so what happened to you if you're actually All Might?" Then he pulls up his shirt and says, "This happened," and you can see a giant scar in the side of his torso. And then Izuku says, "Wait, is it from the chainsaw villain?" And well, All Might's quite impressed by his fanboyish, because that happened a few years back, and it was almost close to the date that he gave for Izuku. But he says, "No, this is from one that wasn't published, for good reason too." But anyway, I'll explain. My quirk can be passed down to another. You see, I was once quirkless. I wanted to become a hero, just like how you want to become a hero. I saw that look in your eyes when they chewed you out, all those heroes chewed you out, and you had a devoid and dejected face. You want to become a hero too, young man. You must be quirkless, just like me." And then Zuko says, "No, I actually have a quirk." And then All Might says, "Of course you don't have a wait, what?" And he just has a blank face, and he just has a face that says, "Ah?" And Izuku says, "Yeah, but mine apparently is a Yandere Quirk. Apparently it attracts really crazy females towards me. They're also stalkerish. It doesn't turn off either." And All Might said, yeah. You know what? That just gives me more encouragement, because you need to defend yourself." And then he says, "So, do you want to become a hero? Do you want to become my successor?" And Izuku says, "Yeah, I'll become your successor. After all, it'll help me get into UA." And then immediately, All Might says, "You know what? I actually am a teacher at UA, so that actually works out quite well." So he just says, "Now, all that you have to do is to inherit my quirk, since you already have the physique." Basically, All Might just putting his hand on, Midoriya's chest and like just feeling him up a little bit on the torso, just to check if he's worthy, while Izuku's just looking at him and saying, "I forgot my rape whistle. Help! All Might's trying to get me." And all of a sudden, All Might just covers his mouth and says, No, just let it happen. Wait, that sounded wrong. No, I'm just trying to check if your physique is built enough to inherit my quirk." And immediately Izuku says, "Oh, that's what you were doing. Oh, okay." And then he says, "All right, now that I checked this, you have to eat this." And he pulls out a piece of his hair. But some yaoi writer somewhere else is like, "There's content I must write." And All Might starts to shiver, and so does Izuku. And then they both say, I think we just heard something." And then All Might says, "No, we really didn't. I felt a shiver, though. Did you?" And Izuku said, "Yeah. So what do you want me to eat?" And immediately All Might says, "This piece of hair. You have to eat some of my DNA to actually get my quirk. And also, it'll have to adjust to you. So you may be breaking a few bones." And immediately Izuku says, okay." He just eats the hair without hesitation. Without any hesitation whatsoever. And All Might says, you just ate my hair without any hesitation, right? Like, I know I explained it, but, you really just trusted me out of nowhere?" And Izuku says, "You're All Might. Why would you lie to me? Plus, I'm a fanboy, so..." And All Might just, steps a few feet back and says, I'm just gonna go." And then Izuku says, "Yeah, you probably should." So Izuku just walks home. Kurumi, who saw this entire interaction, just said, well, seems like Izuku can become a hero after all. I'll be there with him every step of the way, and just disappears into a shadow. And that's where I'm going to end What If Deku Had a Yandere Quirk Part 2. I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure you smash that like button to oblivion if you want another part. Alright, goodbye, peace out. Wacky Anime What If signing off.